Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, I'd like to welcome you, dear viewers, to another in our series, The Forces of Evil. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah's peace and blessings be on each and every one of you. This program, this episode, is a part of a series in which we're looking at how the satanic forces wage war against humans. We've looked at some of the major areas, the areas of doubts and the areas of beautification of desires and sins in our previous episodes. And in this segment, we'll be looking at the discouragement from righteousness. You know, how the satanic forces cause people who do believe in God, do want to do the right thing, but their worship is deviated or sent astray by them being discouraged from doing certain righteous acts that they should do. Now, first and foremost, we find there is encouragement or an effort to get people to give up worship altogether. You know, the abandonment of worship. This is, of course, a major area in which the satanic forces has affected our world and can affect our world and continue to affect our world, where people abandon prayer for a variety of different reasons, whether it be because of calamities in their lives which they can't seem to find explanations for, or it be because of laziness. You know, things, they get involved with other things and they feel lazy, you know, they stay up late at night or whatever, or they, you know, so through laziness they may abandon the prayers, or it may be through being very attached to some other practices. You know, people get, for example, caught up in sports and things like this, and they end up abandoning prayers because of the sports, you know, because of their professions. Or it may be because of material things. People want to get, you know, certain wealth, gather this wealth around them to buy a house and a car and look after family, etc. These type of things. Maybe in their job situation, there's no opportunity for prayer, and they don't want to try to tackle this problem. They wouldn't consider giving up this job and seeking another job. So they'll sacrifice their prayers in these kind of circumstances. Now, of course, these are very dangerous circumstances where a person abandons prayer and it becomes, after that, a way of life with him or her, that they no longer pray. This is a very dangerous state to enter into, because once a person falls into that, really what they have done is they've broken their link with Allah. This is their spiritual link. This is the source by which their spirit is fed, primary source, the source of prayer. So once this link is broken, then they become exposed. You know, other areas of corruption can easily creep up on them. So it's a very, very important link. This is why it's the first pillar of practice in Islam. When a person declares their faith, the first thing that is required of them is to establish the prayer. So to get them to abandon prayers, this is the beginning of the end. It may begin with voluntary prayers that we do, and when a person gives those up, no longer does them, and all that remains is the compulsory prayers, eventually satanic forces try to, you know, to work away and chip away at even this foundation. And this is why we have voluntary acts of worship around all of our compulsory acts of worship, whether it be the daily prayers, or it would be the fasting in Ramadan, or it be the compulsory charity, or it be the pilgrimage. All of these primary acts of worship have along with them voluntary acts of worship which surround them, that we are encouraged to do to protect those primary acts. For example, in our daily prayers, you know, before the morning prayer there are 2 units of voluntary prayers that are recommended, you know, and after our midday prayers, they're not only voluntary prayers before but also voluntary prayers after. And these are explained to serve as a means of protecting that compulsory prayer. On one hand, what it does is it prepares the person spiritually to go into the compulsory prayer, that we don't just stop whatever we're doing, we go straight into compulsory prayer, where our minds may still be caught up in whatever we're involved in, whether it's work, family related, or whatever. Our minds are still there, we enter the prayer, our minds are still outside of the prayer. So there are voluntary prayers there to help get us more focused on it. Also, when we come into the mosque, for example, it's required that we pray 2 units of prayer before we sit down. A person comes and sits in the mosque, somebody else comes and sits beside them, they're all friends, they start chatting about things which have no relationship to do with worshiping God, etc. Then the final call for prayer, the iqamah, is given. They get up to pray, and they're still thinking about their conversation. So what we're enjoined to do whenever we come in is to make 2 units of prayer before sitting down, to put ourselves in the correct frame of mind. And then after the compulsory prayer, there are also voluntary prayers which are encouraged to do, and these make up for deficiencies in our compulsory prayer. In fact, the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, had informed us that when God asks us about the compulsory prayers, he'll ask the angels, about our record of compulsory prayers. After getting that information, then he'll ask about the voluntary prayers, and they will be used as a means to complete deficiencies which are in our compulsory acts of worship. This is a standard. Now, as I said, these voluntary prayers form a kind of a shield around that compulsory prayer, so that a person, in the times of weakness, when their faith is low and people's faith decrease and increase, this is a norm. Nobody's faith just stays high the whole time. No, there's an increase and decrease, constant. So what happens is that the satanic forces may come at us in the time when the faith is down and may cause us to abandon prayer. But what prayer do we abandon? If we have this fortress around our compulsory prayer, we'll abandon the voluntary prayers, and our compulsory prayers will still be intact. But if we only are praying compulsory prayers and we leave out the voluntary prayers, then when we are attacked by these forces in times of weaknesses, then we end up abandoning the compulsory prayers themselves. So, satanic forces may come at us in a variety of different ways. The prayers are the primary area, the area which, if that link is broken, the person is already on the path to hell. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said the distinction between the believers and the disbelievers is salah, the 5 times daily prayer. Whoever abandons it has become a disbeliever. It is so critical, it is so important in the life of the Muslim that they establish their 5 times daily prayer. And that is on time, properly, in the proper format, proper concentration, etc. This is a key to success in both this life and the next. So the satanic forces try to attack that. And we talked about the ways in which doubts are created to make that prayer even more difficult for the individual, etc. But first and foremost, there is this discouragement from worship. It might even come where one sees non-Muslims successful, not praying, they're not involved in prayer, and they've achieved success. One starts to doubt, well, what's the value of this prayer? Satanic forces put these thoughts in their mind, or it may come from some friend around you, a so-called friend. What's the use of the prayers? It's not helping you out, you're not a successful businessman, etc., etc. Well, the bottom line is that prayer is not specifically to provide for the individual's success in this life. It is for success in the next life. That one has the correct frame of mind to deal with the trials and calamities of this life, to patiently bear the difficulties, to find contentment in this life, and ultimately to achieve ultimate success in the next life. So, material success oftentimes doesn't have with it any contentment. People are very successful, they have all the riches in the world, but their lives, they're hollow, they have missing links there. And you find people with all this wealth, etc., get involved in all kinds of corruption. Some of them kill themselves, all these kind of things happen to them. Why? because material wealth really ultimately will not bring us true happiness. So the first area of discouragement from righteousness is the actual discouragement from the prayer itself. The second area is by encouraging the introduction of some innovation or bid'ah. This is one of the ways that the satanic forces operates. Because, as it has been said, whenever an innovation enters into the religion, one of its sunnah practices or practices of the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, is removed. When an innovation comes in, a practice of the Prophet is lost. This is the relationship. It's like a cup. You pour water in it. It can only occupy so much space. The more you pour in of another substance, the less you have of what was originally in there. So this is one of the modes by which people are discouraged from proper worship. Innovations are introduced where people begin to, for example, make pilgrimages to graves, to depend on other intermediaries, to worship in ways which were not prescribed by Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, to try and find shortcuts to paradise. This is a lot of times spiritual shortcuts are offered. And with these innovated ways, people become very attached to them because they're very pleasing to their desires. They're easier, they're fun, or whatever. Whereas the regular drudgery of regular worship, etc., etc., this is looked at as being something, mundane. There's no real benefit in it, etc. The real benefit is in these things which make our spirit alive. So music may become very attractive, so-called religious songs which are filled with all kinds of musical instruments, which are actually forbidden in Islam, but where a person is not aware of innovation and the issues of innovation, may become very attractive to them. And they may feel very much that they're in touch with God through these various means. Another way in which righteousness is discouraged is that major sins are encouraged. Major sins, whether they be adultery, whether they be shirk, or whether they involve fortune telling, or all of the major sins for which the Prophet ﷺ had prescribed hell as the ultimate end, where these sins are encouraged in place of righteousness. People are discouraged from righteousness by the promotion of these major sins. And of course, we spoke about that at length previously, how adultery and fornication, taking drugs, and all these kind of things have become very much attractive to us in the media pumping these things up. Everything that is sold with this heavy sexual overtones, a man and a woman, the woman attracted to the man attracted to the woman, in order to sell different products, etc. This is a means also of encouraging people towards adultery and fornication in the society. Products should be sold according to their merit. What does it have? How good is it? Etc. Not, with these visual images which give the impression that you'll get this or you'll get that of sexual favors if one takes these particular substances. If this fails, then the satanic forces will try to introduce minor sins. If the major sins can't be gotten at, or the individual can't be tricked into or drawn into these major sins, then they will be drawn into minor sins. Minor sins which we tend to look at as, it's not so bad, it's minor, etc. But the Prophet ﷺ warned us. He said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَمُحَقَّرَاتِ الذُّنُوبِ. Beware of the minor sins which you consider to be insignificant. Right? The scorned sins. They're so small. People are involved in, people look at the other people and say, well, they're involved in such big sins. Look what they're doing here, this corruption, so and so. What I'm doing is very small. But the point is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, beware of these minor sins, because they're like an individual who collects sticks in a valley. He wants to make a fire. One stick will not make the bonfire for him to cook on. So he goes and collects sticks from all over the valley, puts them together, then he can make a huge bonfire to cook whatever he planned to cook. These simple sins are like them. What we consider to be insignificant may be very, very significant, in that it links up with other insignificant or minor sins of ours, and then becomes a major setback for ourselves, possibly even drawing us into hell. The other way in which people may be discouraged from righteousness is an issue of priorities, where if we cannot be drawn into minor sins or innovation or major sins, then it becomes one of promoting what is good over what is better. So we're encouraged to do things which they're good in and of themselves, but we're doing them in the wrong place, in the wrong time. And in doing them, we end up abandoning some other righteous deed which is very important. That where a person thinks they're doing good, but in the end, actually what they're doing is wrong, because the priorities have been turned upside down. So for example, a person, it may be time for prayer, and they see an opportunity to do a charitable act. So the idea comes to them, well, let me go and finish off the charitable act, so and so and so, even though I may miss the prayer, because this charitable act is very good, people need this money, or they need so and so and so. So we have rationalized something to go and do this good thing, but on the other hand, what we've done is we abandoned something which is even greater, something more obligatory on us. It's a dangerous way in which the satanic forces can cause us to abandon righteousness. Another way is also to put fear in our hearts and confusion, to discourage, for example, discourage charity, where Allah said in the Quran, "Ash-shaytanu ya'idukum al-faqr wa ya'murukum bil-fahsha." Satan puts fear in your hearts of poverty and commands you to corruption. He puts fear in your heart of poverty, meaning that if you do a charitable act, you're going to have less. Your money is going to be less. Maybe you're going to need it next year or the year after. Maybe it's better not to give it. Different excuses are given to yourself to avoid doing this thing. Whereas, really what you should do, you have this thing what somebody needs, you should just go ahead and give it. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that charity does not decrease wealth. It may appear to. Externally, it appears to decrease. We had $100, we gave away 50, we now have 50. There's less. However, that 100 which we have been given becomes thousands of good deeds for us on the Day of Judgment. It's been increased in value, and the remaining wealth is also blessed. So charity does not decrease wealth, but satanic forces, when a person thinks to be charitable, will come to them and make all these other suggestions to discourage them from doing charitable deeds. So these that I've mentioned are among some of the many different ways in which the satanic forces discourage us from righteousness. Whether they get us to abandon prayers, or to introduce innovations, to think that minor sins are not important, or to put things in the wrong priority, and also to create confusion and doubts amongst ourselves. With that, dear viewers, we'd like to thank you for being with us in this segment of our program, The Forces of Evil. I'm your host, Dr. Bilal Phillips. If you'd like to contact me for further suggestions or questions on this program. You can contact me at Sharjah Television, P.O. Box 111, Sharjah, UAE. Or you may contact me on the email at bilalphillips.com, bilalphilips.com. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.